Good morning. We're going to start the next panel. I'm going to give people a few seconds. We have a great panel coming up. It's drones, dashboards, and data-driven public safety. Give it a minute. Our presenter is going to be John Tomik, and I want everyone to help me to welcome him up to the stage and also the panel. So if everyone can help me and welcome up to the stage, it'd be great.
Thank you so much. And you have to thank Captain Leo for the promotional trailer video for our panel today. If you didn't get a chance to catch it, it's pretty inspiring. I'm very excited about our panel discussion here today. Public safety is really going through a revolution right now with real-time data, drones, robotics. The technology is amazing in what it can do to help people stay safe in the world. And then there's another thing that has to be considered, and that is really the acceptance of the community. And so I couldn't be more thrilled to pull together the panelists today, and I'd like to just take a moment to introduce each of you. Actually, I should introduce myself first, sorry. First, let me just, who am I? My name is John Tomik. I am a managing director at a consulting firm called Slalom. I run an innovation laboratory in One World Trade Center and have been focused on technologies like robotics and augmented reality. And so this is extremely passionate. It's a passionate panel for me. So anyway, I'm glad to be here. Now, let me introduce my panelists here. So first, our first panelist on the other end over there is a pioneer in the use of drones for public safety. As a retired police captain from Chula Vista Police Department, my neck of the woods, I live in California, he conceived of and helped launch the nation's first drone as a first responder program. Now as director of DFR Consulting at Flock Safety, he's working to bring cutting-edge drone technology to law enforcement nationwide. So please welcome Fritz Reber.
Thank you.
Okay, sitting next to Fritz, true innovator in emerging response technology, emergency response. Captain Michael Leo has over 20 years with FDNY, where he leads the robotics team, integrating drones, ground robots, and AI to keep first responders and civilians safe. His work is shaping the future of firefighting and urban disaster response. So please welcome Captain Michael Leo. Last but not least, we have a leader focused on making public safety technology work for the people. Council member Letitia Plummer serves Houston at large, championing smart city initiatives, equitable public safety, and policies that ensure technology is used responsibly and transparently. She's also a dentist, which is, if you get a chance to catch her after the panel, has an amazing background. So please welcome Councilmember Letitia Plummer. Okay, so here's the plan for today. We're gonna break this into a few sections, right? First, I'd really like to talk about why now. You know, this is a big topic, and I think there's a really important piece of this that we can discuss around why now. Then, what we're going to get into is the technology itself. So, talking about drones, talking about robotics, talking about the value that it brings. From there, we're going to dive a little bit more into the data, which is where it starts to get really interesting, because there is a lot of data that's collected with these technologies, and that has implications. And we're going to round this out by talking a little bit about policy and what's important and how adoption can be beneficial for cities going forward. So if we get through all of that in record time, which I doubt, we're going to probably have run out of time here, but if we do, we've got a little bit of a lightning round. We'll save that towards the end, and I'll wrap it up at the end. Sound like a good plan? Okay, so let's start with the big picture. Why now? I really would like to start by talking about how public safety is shifting towards technology a little bit, and why data-driven solutions are becoming so important. So, Captain Leo, if you don't mind me starting with you, can you just tell me a little bit about your perspective on that?
Yeah, so I mean, timing is everything, and as we were very early adopters of this specific technology, and when you're talking about public safety, you have to wait until the technology is at the near 100% reliability point before you're going to put it in use, right? It has to work every time, no matter what. And so we started this whole thought process of becoming a robotics program, which drove us into other things as time went on. But this was like around 2014, 2012, we had a meeting with the FAA around 2014, flying drones in New York City at 2017. And then, you know, there was no real good data back then to how we were going to safely accomplish this in such a big city. So we have all these problems with tall buildings, radio frequency spectrum is totally saturated, and we have all these issues going on, air traffic, 8 million people. There's a lot of hurdles that we had to overcome. So we kind of isolated each one of those, and then technology also had a way of working itself out over time with innovation and improvements. And so, you know, it's a great time to be in the field because it is reliable technology, and it's exciting to see what's coming next.
Thank you. And Fritz, if you don't mind, can you go a little bit into the problems that we're trying to solve with this technology right now? Because this doesn't seem to me to be like a technology looking for a solution. This definitely feels like an example of real problems that are out there that can be solved with drones and real-time data.
Yeah, I think drones, I mean, that's kind of my world, but I work for a company that has a lot of different ways of gathering information. So the goal really is to get information, get it, consume it, and use it and respond to it. And so drones are one very newer, unique way of doing it, and it has some capabilities that hadn't been around for a while. And so we can get into the discussion on drones. I think drones are more a recent development, but there's also a lot of tools like license plate readers and fixed cameras and the ability to search video to find suspects and information and evidence. And so from a public safety standpoint, it's like get as many ways as we can get information in, get it to the people who can consume it, access it, use it, and then be able to respond to it. I think that's more capable now with all the sensors and the computing and stuff that's available, and we can get into specifically drone as first responder, which is one aspect of the bigger picture that gets a lot of attention. Drones are kind of interesting, you know, a little bit scary, dystopic, so there's a lot of you know, issues related to community engagement and getting people understanding how police and fire are using them. I come from a public safety background. You know, we want to use it to be able to learn what's happening. So DFR, drone as first responder, which you mentioned, is a specific way of using drones that's been developed over the last several years, and that is pre-positioned drones ready to go at a moment's notice. So as soon as the call comes in, as soon as the notification of the emergency comes in, whether it's someone dialing 911, whether it's an alarm, whether it's a license plate reader activation, whether it's a gunshot, the drones would respond there first, learn what's happening, give first responders intelligence. Is this even something we should go to? If so, how do we go? What do we bring? Let's begin to respond more intelligently. That's what the community expects. And so I think now is sort of hitting critical mass, and the cities across the United States are getting DFR programs, as well as the other tools I've talked about, to be able to respond more intelligently and effectively to protect the community.
You mentioned intelligence. The other thing that strikes me about the value of drones is speed. So, you know, being able to get there as quick as possible feels like one of those why now big problems that we're trying to solve. And Captain Leo, I don't know if are there any specifics that you know you can talk about with the use of drones in the city of New York that might help?
Sure. I mean, so the fire department's approach right now is you know, we're looking for that next moment where we go into a DFR program, because we have one unit currently for the whole New York City. So we actually have to drive the drone to the incident, and then start flying. So time is definitely an issue for us. So, you know, if it was something that's deep into Staten Island, which is far away, and with the congestion that we have in New York City, it could take us an hour or two to get to a certain location. And wouldn't it be easy just to fly the drone in a pre-positioned location? So this is definitely something that we're looking to gear up for in the very near future.
Okay. I think Councilwoman Plummer, let's talk a little bit about the why now when it comes to just how cities are thinking about this and how government is helping the process along. So are there any big why now moments that you can think about? We were talking a little bit before about climate change, you know, weather events. To me, those feel like really interesting triggers for why technologies like this could be introduced into cities. Does that resonate with you? Anything you want to?
Yeah, no, absolutely. In Houston, there are 3 spaces we typically use drone technology. Our SWAT teams use them for any homeland security issues, hostage situations, places where it would be unsafe for our police officers to enter. I love the fact that we use them from an environmental perspective. As Houston, as you know, we have one of the largest ports. Environmental concerns are a big deal. And so our drones are able to go in and determine if there's a fire, a chemical fire, what chemical is being released there, and how harmful it is to the community, so we can make the community aware pretty quickly. And the final, our fire department uses drones. We have, as everyone knows, Houston, we get hurricanes all the time. Flooding is a big deal for the city of Houston. And so how do we get to people? Where is high water? Understanding that, and then how can we easily access those people to save their lives before our firefighters have to be in harm's way. So those are the 3 large spaces. And Houston is 625 square miles. It's a very, very large, and it's all flat. And so the use of drone technology is incredibly important because it's hard to get people to where they need to be in a record amount of time.
I'm going to tease out one of the upcoming points that we're going to hit a little bit stronger, but I've got to imagine that there's a pretty big, Fritz, I think you mentioned, or Captain Leo or Fritz, either one of you mentioned dystopia. You know, drones tend to be considered dystopian, things you see in science fiction films. There's a big privacy regulatory hurdle that needs to be overcome with some of these technologies. And Letitia, I don't know if you, yes, I know you have some opinions about that.
Yes. In our communities, we're worried. I mean, you know, what I hear from people kind of on the ground is, are we surveilling or are we gathering information? And then when we're doing one or the other, what are we doing with it? And so one piece of this conversation is educating community and having them understand the differences. And when we get that data, are we assured that that data is not going to be shared with other people that can harm them? And so that's really the biggest part of it. We also see, you know, the license plate readers, you know, we use ShotSpotter in the city of Houston as well. And one thing that I think that our city did incredibly well was, instead of using one specific technology, kind of triangulating multiple technologies. So a 911 call, in addition to a license plate reader, in addition to a ShotSpotter signal. That way we can kind of make sure that we're not going to arrest someone that doesn't need to be arrested. We're not going to impinge on their privacy. And we have 3 data points so we can determine that this is where we, number 1, need to be dispatched. And number 2, the crime or issue is happening in that specific place. And I think that's a fair way of looking at it for community, because they don't feel like they're being singled out or, you know, looked at from that perspective.
Right. Okay, so that's the why now. And I think there's probably very little debate that the technology can provide value, but there's things to think about. So let's go a little bit deeper on the technologies and the use cases, if you don't mind. Captain Leo, can you give some examples of how the FDNY is using drones, robots in the city today? And, you know, or even expand on how you'd like to use them in the future.
Sure. So we started using drones with the idea of fires, and they are an incredible tool for fires. So when we have that aerial view from the drone and we're using different sensors, like we use a thermal sensor so we can see the heat condition, and that's the one we use most for fires. It allows us to see our members on the roof or in other locations. If they're in danger, we can track them. In Manhattan, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we saw somebody had to actually remove themselves from the roof via rope, which is a very dangerous condition for us, but we were able to see that that person was actually safe. We notified the command post, and that kind of, the efficiency of a fireground operation is so improved in that case, because now we don't have to call a mayday, and resources aren't coming into that one person. We know they're safe, and so safety for firefighters, that's, you know, paramount. And then the fire, we can track the fire, we can see where it's moving, and we see hot spots. We have a view that we've never had before, and for the incident commander, this is so important. And some of the incident commanders take it as, you know, in the beginning it was difficult, right? It's just the old school versus the new school, and get that thing away from here. And as they started to look at the information we were providing, they realized now they look for us at the command post, because they realize they may not look at the drone feed, which you really don't want them to the whole time. We have an officer who does that to interpret the information, but they will use it to maybe even validate their decisions that they make without the drone. And they can say, yeah, that decision is working. And then it's morphed into all different incidents, the hazardous materials, structural stability of buildings. I mean, we're using it for almost every use case, technical rescues, high-angle rescues, trench rescues, subterranean events. So they become so useful, and I just could go on and on. We're seeing all these new things. We use them in Rockaway Beach for beach patrol. So that started with a mayor directive to look for sharks, and immediately, you know, that's important. And then we see swimmers in distress. Okay, now we have a drone, we can see rip currents. Maybe we can get those people out of the situation before it happens. And we work well with the lifeguards. Now we can drop these emergency flotation devices to the people. So, you know, last year we did 26 water rescues with the drone team, and legitimate ones. So we're having a great effect in that area, which I wouldn't have thought in the beginning. And so we're traveling down all these avenues that we didn't really see, and we'll continue to use them in all kinds of innovative ways.
So, super inspiring. I mean, these are all really, really good uses of the technology. So Fritz, I'm curious, if these use cases are just so compelling, what are the challenges right now that you see with scaling up drone technology? And maybe if you had a magic wand and you could wave it at Captain Leo here, what would you wish could happen so that this technology could just scale to where it needs to be?
So scaling is key, and the type of operations Mike's talking about is, you know, one person flying one drone over one incident, and you see the obvious value there. You know, go to a fire and you get that view, and he's probably the best in the world at doing that. A lot of practice on a daily basis. The different type of operation, the DFR that I defined before, where the immediate deployment is a way to get that capability to scale for not just those calls that are obvious drone calls, but every single call. Because the drone is just an extension of the first responder. It's just a way to virtually be somewhere you don't physically want to be or can't be, you know, whether it's around that door first, when there may be some shooter in there, or in that dangerous tunnel or whatever. And so once the idea was, hey, we know how we're using drones traditional way, hand flying, it's great. How do we scale that? And that was just the whole idea of DFR, and that is pre-position the drones so that they go even before a human can process what's happening. They're on their way and overhead and showing you what's happening before you might have even understood what was happening, that it was even happening before. License plate reader activations, or hearing the 911 call and someone could just be screaming, and you could get to the scene before the call taker would realize, oh, it's somebody who's choking or it's a domestic violence. The drone operator would say, that doesn't sound good, I know where it is, let me go there, and we'll figure it out while I'm there. So that immediate situational awareness before any humans on the ground are involved get there. And a lot of times you don't even have to send them because it's not what you thought it was, or you don't have to send the resources. So from that perspective, you're scaling a known quantity to every call all the time, everywhere, for efficiency, rapid response, officer safety, de-escalation. But then obviously the ability to do that requires regulatory relief, the FAA, the permissions, which we've just had a breakthrough this last week that looks to be transformational and really a point maybe where we talk about DFR before today and after today. It was a turning point. And then obviously companies like, I come to Flock Safety from an acquisition of Aerodome was a DFR company that I came to, and we were a small outfit, and Flock Safety is in the information business, and DFR or drones were one more way to get information into the center and make decisions. And so you get these big companies, and we're not the only one. You have Axon, you have Skydio, you have Brink, that are really seeing this being something every city, every police agency, every fire agency wants to have. And so scaling it in terms of cost-effective equipment, reliable equipment, like you were talking about, and the regulatory relief to operate. I think we're at the kind of it's been around for 5 or 6 years, but we're at the sweet spot within this month probably.
I think there's one other thing that needs to happen for scaling to occur, and that really has to do with communities, engagement, adoption. There's a concern around privacy. There's a concern around data. And Council Member Plummer, what do you think are the big barriers that need to overcome in that area so that this can actually move forward as a real scalable technology?
Now, definitely believe community engagement, but also a cost. I mean, a lot of cities that you see in the nation right now are having a really tough time. We have to figure out how can we allocate money federally? How can we drive that to the state? What's the state's perspective of how that money can be spent? I mean, in Texas, public safety is a very big priority for the state, and then also for the cities. So cost is something that we have to have a conversation about. In the city of Houston, although our police budget is incredibly large, that has to come to council and has to be voted upon. And does it fall into the city budget? Does it fall into the general fund? That's one question, especially for scalability. But community engagement is really important. I mean, we have to make sure the communities understand that they're not being watched, that we don't have RoboCop running down, the street, and that you're not being surveillanced while you're sleeping and resting, and that we're not listening to every conversation that you're having. And so that's us getting out into community, explaining the difference, having them understand why this is necessary, that this is saving lives. It's actually an opportunity to assist. No one's going to lose their job. We still need police officers to be there. We still need our fire departments to save us. But this can get us there faster to a specific location is really what we have to drive home. And I believe in the city of Houston, there are enough advocates and activists they're asking the right questions and making sure that there are intelligent conversations happening around this. But because our city is so large and so vast, it is imperative that we use drone technology, especially with our severe weather issues that we're experiencing and the environmental piece as well.
Right. So let's go a little deeper. Let's talk a little bit about the data, right? Because I think a drone is a wonderful aerial camera, kind of at the core, right? It's a flying sensor. The data that it collects, starting with you, Captain Leo, can you talk a little bit about how the data is starting to help out with some of these core problems? Like, is it helping response times? What are you doing with the data?
So the data, when we have a regular operation, is used in many, many different ways. So initially, when we're in an operation, we securely and safely have to disseminate this video, really, or depends on what the data is coming in, right? Because we're full-scale robotics. We also do remotely operated marine vehicles and ground robots. So it could come in the form of video, it could come in the form of LiDAR, it could come in the form of sonar, right? So it's just data. And in the beginning, we are using it to make these decisions that I spoke about earlier. But I'll give an example of a collapse that we had in Manhattan at a parking garage where this is where data became very important. So we had somebody inside, we couldn't access them. So we're going to use the drones and robots to acquire this data, and then we need the medical field to look at the data so they can see what is wrong with the patient. And then the Department of Buildings have engineers there. They want to know the stability of the structure. So now we share it with them. And then the data gets used with the Department of Justice. They wanted the feed. NYPD, they're doing investigations because they want to know how this or why this building collapsed. And then in the back end of things after the incident, it could be used in many different ways as well. It could be used, the press office could take it, training could take it. A lot of times our chauffeur school where we teach people how to drive fire trucks, what was the placement of all the fire trucks? We're capturing all that data. So it just is used in so many different ways. So, you know, and one of the things that we have to be better at is, you know, how are we going to automate this data transfer in a quicker way? Right now, the drone pilots take the data right out of the drone into a digital electronic management storage system, which is the way that it should be, but all the systems could be automated down the line, and it's already available. It's just a matter of implementing it, and you know, that's the road that we'd like to take soon.
And Fritz, maybe you can expand on this a little bit. I've got to imagine that this technology is moving awfully fast. And are there things that you wish Captain Leo would leverage? You know, capabilities, features, things that would. I'm trying to be as best a salesperson as I can for you here. Anything that you can think of that would help, either in the collection of data, transmission of data, analysis of data, that you think will make a real difference?
Yeah, I don't ever tell Mike what to do, so, but yeah, I get your point. And kind of actually building on the point you were talking about, because when I was first thinking about data, it's as a consumer, as a police officer, as a captain, like, how do I use this data? I just want access to it. How do I share it? Because we want it to act upon it. But to touch on what Letitia was talking about, and you alluded to, was there's other people who have a stake in that data that aren't the consumers of it. And so, you know, people who lead programs, that's one of our responsibilities, is to use it responsibly. And how do we do that? And you know, I really didn't think about it. I came over to the company. I got a lesson in it today, as a matter of fact. The three first principles of data from a vendor perspective, or from a back-end perspective, is controlling access, having an audit system, and then having a retention policy. So you know who's getting it, you can control that, you know whoever's using it, when they're using it, and why, so you can go back and look, because people are inevitably going to make mistakes or do the wrong thing. People are people, so you have to have a system of accountability in place, and then a retention policy. And some of this work has been done for drones because it's already been out there with body-worn cameras, fixed cameras, license plate readers, cell phone data. So there's systems in place, and that's being streamlined, and you have big players making it easy for the consumers, which scales it more. But that's the other aspect of a stakeholder in who has a stake in where that information, that data goes. So it's a full circle that the end user is not really aware of, but that's what's becoming very streamlined, very effective. And I think that's what will prevent communities from pushing back and saying, okay, I feel there's a transparency there, there's accountability there. If something goes wrong, and inevitably stuff does, people will be held accountable, they'll change their ways, and that way we can get the best of it without sacrificing our privacy and things that we care about. I'm not sure if I touched on your question, but.
And if I could jump in, I think there are three other pieces from a community perspective. Number one, the sensitivity level. How dependable is it? Is it actually truly accurate? Number two, is it non-bias? How do we ensure that it's not focusing on one particular community over another one? And then the last piece is, can't we share the information? Why does everyone have to gather? I mean, we've got 60 public safety and transportation entities in the city of Houston and the county. It's a lot of government entities. Does everyone need their own data? Can't we find a way in real time to synchronize and share all that data and protect it all at the same time? From a community perspective, that's incredibly important. And if we could promise that if someone is found on a license plate reader, or if ShotSpotter hears something, that the wrong person isn't going to be arrested because they look like a person that should be a culprit, how do we make sure that doesn't happen and it's as dependable as it needs to be?
you're touching on a couple of different topics, which I want to make sure that I kind of highlight for the audience here too. There's two things that you're talking about. One, interoperability. So how do you share? How do you, if you're collecting data, it should be used to the best of the ability, right? I mean, there's probably multiple ways that data points can be leveraged. The second piece, which I think is really important, and that is, how do you build trust within the communities where these technologies are being deployed? I'm going to stick with you just for a quick question. So how do you build trust? I mean, there are a lot of science fiction films that are out there that show that the bad side of where technology can go. And what's your secret? How do you talk to the public about this?
So I'll just use ShotSpotter as an example, because I think that was one contentious item that came to council. Number one, it was incredibly expensive, so convincing community that we'll use your taxpayer dollars to do this. Number two, we couldn't share where we were placing them because of breach of security, so we couldn't share that. So communities wanted to know, are you only putting in Black and brown communities? Where exactly are you putting them? Are they in wealthier communities? Like, what does that look like? And then I think what was successful for us was when it didn't work as effectively or as efficiently as they said it would, allow us to go back to the drawing board and rethink how we could use it. And so when HPD and the union came and said, listen, ShotSpotter may not be as sensitive, or maybe it's because Houston is so spread out, it may not be as sensitive. Let's use a three-pronged approach to make sure. And so I think when community sees that, yes, we're putting something in place, but we're also listening to you, and we're also making sure that you're engaged and a part of the conversation, then it's really easy. We don't have the challenges. And I think that our community in Houston saw that. And now they understand that we're not trying to look at one particular space. We're not trying to, arrest anyone, that doesn't need to be arrested. We're not trying to surveillance your space. And so I think that as we move forward, because that was really the first big piece of technology that we used, now license plate readers are actually okay. They're okay with us using license plate readers because they know that we're looking for specific things. So I think that putting it out there, hearing the feedback from community, the community seeing that the public, that their elected officials are listening to them, and that we're auto-correcting what we're doing is the way that we gain trust.
Perception is everything. In fact, I know we talked, Captain Lee, a little bit about this. Let's talk a little bit about our favorite robot that was in that parking garage. So Spot, literally for the FDNY, has spots. You painted the robot like a Dalmatian, and the public perception of that robot performing a job, in my opinion, was very positive. It was kind of perceived as part of the team and a hero, which is a different perception than, say, that same technology that was deployed in more of a police situation. So can you tell me a little bit about how you're breaking misconceptions and perceptions out there with these technologies?
Yeah, so I had read in a magazine at one point, context, timing, and design, those three elements when you're releasing something or using some technology, very important, right? There's not much we can do about the design. And when we were looking for this, so these robots are very expensive. They're used for very low occurrence, high consequence events, things that are very, very dangerous to people. It's very necessary that we have them. And then you start thinking about secondary worth. And then when it comes to public perception, how are we going to roll this out? How are we going to show them? So what we did was we took all the robots that we had, which we had robots prior to this. They had all the same sensors. They had the same arm. We laid them all out. Now, the only difference with this robot, it's a quadruped, so it has it looks like a dog, right? So the only thing with design we can do is maybe make it look a little more friendly, and we put the Dalmatian on it. We named it Berg. Berg is after Henry Berg, who's the founder of the ASPCA, a New Yorker. So we named some of our robots. We have another robot named Hayes. It looks like a fire truck, and Daniel D. Hayes was the inventor of the aerial ladder, which that robot looks like. And we invited the New York Times in to do an article. And it's great because, you know, as a good reporter, they have to come in with, you know, what we're talking about, and then, you know, the other side of things, you know, and the public's opinion and perception of what might happen. And so, you know, the only thing we can really do is let everybody know what we're doing, how we're using it, and be completely transparent about our operations. And it worked very well in this case, you know, so we were able to use that robot to our advantage, and it worked out very well in that case.
I think that's amazing. I mean, I think the softer side of technology is something that a lot of groups tend to forget about. So in the spirit of that, and I know we could talk all day. Like this is such a fun topic to talk about, but I'm getting you have a few minutes left to sign. Fritz, I want to ask you one more quick question before we wrap up. What do you think is one myth that should be busted with drone technology or any of this type of technology? Is there something that, you know, just from an industry, from a provider of this technology that you think should just be dispelled?
I think it's just a very simple myth that somehow drones are different than other cameras. I think because the camera is wrapped in a drone that it has a certain perception, much like your example of the spot dog. Because it looks like a dog, somehow it's more dystopian or different or something of fear. I think there was a Black Mirror episode that came out where very, very similar dogs attacked people. So it's just like, hey, that just makes me feel uncomfortable. And so people think if there's a drone up ahead, up above, then somehow they can see in our windows and they can see more than the fixed cameras that are 12 and 15 and 20 feet around people everywhere they go. So they're very comfortable with those cameras. It's just that they're not flying and moving. And so I guess the biggest myth is we're more capable as a user of drones at seeing things on the ground than you would be if you were on the ground with a cell phone or something like that. That it is just because it's different and flying that I think will fade over time, that I think people will. And then the drone, the term, we were battling early days of whether even to call it a drone. We were calling it UAS, Unmanned Aircraft System, because drones were the term that the news used to talk about the bigger, you know, things that drop bombs in the Middle East and stuff. And so, but I think everyone's kind of understands the difference between the two drones. But I guess that, just have that be dispelled and people understand the capabilities, the good and the bad and the limitations, and not think of it as any different than the other cameras that are around them.
I'm going to give you last word. You're a member of the Council for Houston. Is there a challenge that you'd like to give to other cities out there in regards to how to embrace these technologies, or any last words that you can inspire other cities that may be in the audience right now on where to go next?
I think it's just town halls, it's conversations, it's listening to community, it's when you're wanting to put something forward. You know, in our city, we've got district members. Team up with your district members and talk to them about what's going on. Really, the confusion here and the mistrust here is just lack of understanding. That's really what it is. We need to understand that drone technology, AI, and all the other technology that we're utilizing, the goal of it is to save lives. It's to create a safe space for everyone to live. And I think that's what we all want. We want to live in a city that's safe and secure. And so I think just being transparent and understanding that drones typically are used not for surveillance. They're used to gather information, and it's not information about you specifically, it's an overarching conversation or an overarching issue. And I think if we just communicate and don't make it so secretive and so sci-fi, I believe that communities are going to engage. We've been incredibly successful in Houston, and I know that all of you will as well.
I want to thank all of you for joining the panel. I hope you learned something today about the technology, got inspired as I have been over the last few days, getting to prepare for today, and let's go make these cities safer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.